So hello and welcome to everyone who's watching. My name is Ellen Kartz. I'm the Communications and Partnerships Coordinator with the Writers Guild of Alberta and also the Assistant Editor with their flagship magazine, WestWord. This video is part of an interview series that I'll be conducting with, on behalf of WestWord, speaking with some local Edmonton writers about some of the important work they're doing here in the fight against racism. The WJ has made a commitment to stand with writers, artists, and Canadians in that ongoing fight, and that commitment was the springboard for this interview series. So before we begin, I think it's important to recognize that it's a privilege to hold this conversation on Treaty 6 territory. This is the traditional meeting ground and home for so many Indigenous peoples, including Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and Nakota Sioux. And in our conversation today, it's my hope that we honor the memory of so many peaceful conversations that have been held here on Treaty 6 territory for centuries. So today I will be speaking with Lisa Dublin. So welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time today. It's great to see you. And great to talk.
Yes, it's an honor. Thank you, Ellen.
Yeah, okay. So Lisa has called Edmonton home for the past 7 years. She was born in the Caribbean island of Saint Lucia and migrated to Canada with her husband and sons in 2013. She currently works for the University of Alberta and is also chair of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity Committee of the Non-Academic Staff Association, NASA. She is a writer and performance poet, and her themes include race and religion, relationships, inspiration, and personal development. So welcome, Lisa, and thank you again. It is good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, it's been a while. I first met you when you were part of the Borderlands program, so it's been a while.
Yeah. That was life changing. I think that was like my interest, like introduction to the Edmonton writing scene and so on. Yeah, so it was a wonderful experience, wasn't it?
Glad to hear that. And I was wonderful to see the community that developed out of those programs. Like each year, it just seemed like more people gathered into that community and joined it and stayed.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and
so
we're in contact too, so that like you build friends in that circle.
I'll bet you do. Yeah.
For sure.
So maybe we could begin by talking a little bit about the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity Committee and NASA and what they're about, what their mandate is.
Okay, so NASA, the Non-Academic Staff Association, is the union that represents all support staff at the University of Alberta. And so I am the chair of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity Committee. There are quite a few other committees. There's a membership committee. There's one that does political action. Then we have an HR committee, etc. I think the EDI committee has probably been thrown into relief somehow because of what's going on in our world right now. And we've tried to step up to the plate by, first of all, finding out what our members want to know about and trying to provide those resources for knowledge. There's not much more that can be done, but just in terms of education now, just because we're still, basically hunkering down. Most of the classes at the university are going to be remotely delivered this term. And so a lot of the support staff will be working from home, including me. So what we've said is, at least we can have an education drive in this kind of climate to be able to help people to navigate and to answer the questions that they have about equity, about racism, about diversity and inclusivity. And it's been, some of our lunch and learn sessions, I think you were at one of them, Ellen. They have been well attended, and what I've really appreciated as well is the questions that come after the sessions, the presenters. You have people asking very honest, open questions of them, and that has been very rewarding, I think.
I'll bet, yeah. Can you talk a little bit about some of those lunch and learn sessions?
Sure. Okay. So actually, before I do that, I wanted to just talk about the makeup of EDI so that because it kind of informs the kind of lunch and learns that we deliver, right? So I'm the chair and I'm Black, yeah. And we do have a very motley and diverse, a committee, I think. We have, I think, almost every race represented. and just diverse in terms of its makeup. And so you have people bringing in different concerns. I have to admit, I guess my own grounding would be with race, just because I've always been very Afrocentric, very involved and in love, I guess, with my race, and with finding a place for every creed, etc., on earth, right? That has just been my thing. I've been introduced to a set of people who have differing concerns, albeit as important. So for example, when you talk EDI, it's not just about race, it's gender, it's sexuality. It also has to do with inclusivity of people with disabilities, which is a big thing for me as well, coming from the Caribbean, and seeing, just how displaced those people can be. And so you have that represented. You have people who have, for example, disabilities that you might not see, invisible disabilities. And that too we've brought to the fore, because on the committee you have people whose bent, whose focus would be right there. So because we have that kind of diversity on the committee, what we've done is brainstorm the kinds of things that would interest us and the people who are around us. So some of the lunch and learns, to go to your question, Ellen, we've had a session around Eid that dealt with the meaning of Eid, and how could somebody who's not a Muslim, a non-Muslim, actually support a staff member who is. Some awkward questions come in there, but they were honestly answered and honestly asked, and we were very grateful for that. We also, at that time, it was in March, and we had just the world had just woken up to COVID, I think. And we did a lunch and learn on the whole anti-racism against Asians in Edmonton. That too was an eye-opener. It was also very relevant because people were experiencing it, right? We dealt, George Floyd came along May 25th on Memorial Day in the US, and that just raised so many questions. It brought to the fore the whole Black Lives Matter movement here as well. Police brutality, it also, I think, also unearthed, and it gave a lot of weight and voice to Indigenous matters. And the whole problem with the over incarceration of Indigenous people. It was just like a whole chain reaction of issues, I think, that had to do with EDI. So we did the one on Muslim traditions. Then we looked at anti-Asian racism. We looked at racism as Black people within Canada. And lastly, the last one we did dealt with the over incarceration of Indigenous people in Canada. All well received. Our presenters came from just what the focus was. And I think people learned a lot. We had people who came back every single time for the lunch and learns. I have to admit, I myself learned quite a bit.
I'll bet. So were those sessions recorded? Like, are they available for people to see?
Yes, they're on YouTube, so I could probably they were recorded on Zoom.
Okay, we'll make sure the link is there for those.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
let's spread the word.
So what is coming up? What do you guys have on the dock coming up with EDI? Because you said you have new programs coming up.
Yeah, we are now looking at a survey on EDI for our support staff members. We want to know what have been the experiences of people who work at the University of Alberta, the support staff, in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusivity issues. So for me, we've been working on it for a few months, even before March. We began last year, I think. And so that is the next thing we want to roll out. And it's a big project. The reason being, we expect to just glean a lot of information from that survey. Because if we can answer the questions and the problems, we make ourselves as the committee and as NASA even more relevant for the times. So that's the next big thing. We'll probably do a few more lunch and learns, but right now we are on a well-needed hiatus. I have to tell you, just delving into all of these issues, as you can well imagine and probably know, it has been draining. It has been emotionally taxing, particularly because you have more time to think, being at home, even working from home, and to reflect and to try to be inspirational and positive in spite of thinking that it's all going to pieces kind of thing. So I'm pretty happy for the hiatus to kind of refresh and rejuvenate whatever, and then get back into the fight, because I've realized EDI, particularly racism, etc. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon that calls for very heartfelt answers to problems, not the fly-by-night anger that comes after seeing a chauvin's knee on George Floyd's neck, or seeing the next Indigenous person wrongly accused and put in prison. It requires a kind of measured response that will stand the test of time. So I'm trying to find that right now.
You know, that really resonates, because there has been so many changes throughout this year, and it's almost impossible to keep up. But it does feel like we're all sort of generally stepping back and taking a moment's pause to reflect on some of what we've witnessed and seen and experienced. And so that's good that you guys with that committee are taking that time too, to figure out what the next steps are going to be and what that's going to look like. That's yeah. Now I know in your own work as a writer, performer, and motivational speaker, you have a web series called the Basement Chronicles.
Basement Chronicles, yeah.
So could you talk about that just a little bit? Because you're talking about inspiration and motivation, and that's really the focus of what that series does.
Yeah, it is. So when we went on lockdown, I'd been planning to get back into the whole motivational space for a while. I'd been doing it back home in Saint Lucia before I left. But, you know, the last 7 years we've basically been trying to survive and trying to make it here. You know, I had a kid when I came up here. My third son was born here. And I also did a master's here. So I really didn't have the time to even think. Right. So just before, I think perhaps beginning last year, I began to, you know, be settled enough to want to get back into the things that were dear to me, which was inspiring people and being positive and saying, basically, you can do it, let's go. And part of the reason is because I needed to tell my own self that. And I think when the lockdown came, a lot of things came together, Ellen. For example, I suddenly realized when I looked on television that people were just being themselves. It was finally okay to not have the bells and whistles. I was in the media back home, and so the bells and whistles were having the cameras, the lights, having backgrounds, being in a studio, whatever. I saw people broadcasting from their homes, bookshelves in the background, just doing what they did. Makeup not the best anymore because you don't have the makeup artists there, whatever. And it just occurred to me, this might be the best time to just be myself and to use what I had where I was to do what I wanted to do. And that's where it started from. Just like, okay, we had tried to get a studio that denied us just before COVID. And I was like, you know what? We just got, you know, some cheap lights on Amazon. My husband is also into the media. That's where we met. And so we just went back into doing, and with my iPhone, I'm still doing it with my iPhone. I haven't got any fancy anything as yet. I also at the same time, you know, just started honing my craft with public speaking, etc., taking some courses. And it really galvanized me to start something. And the content was just there. Everybody just needed encouragement, including me. And half the time I'm doing Basement Chronicles, and when I go back and look at it, I'm encouraged. Like, that's what it's doing for me. Right. Yeah, so that's what it is. And what keeps it going is that somebody said to me a long time ago, a friend said to me, "You're just so earnest. You're always learning something." Yeah, so I'm always just learning stuff and wanting to put it out there because, you know, I'm just that person who wants to be the best that I can, like everybody, I guess. But it's just my platform, and I figure, like, if I always have something to say, I will always be able to do this. So it's just a 3-minute inspirational video, and I kept it to 3 minutes because, frankly, as a professional woman with family and everything, I do not have more than 3 minutes. Yeah,
that's fair. It's what I found really interesting about those videos is that you deal with these universal things that everybody has to face at some point, like staying motivated and staying optimistic and staying focused on whatever job you got in front of you. And you know, that's what I've gotten out of it, is that universality of sort of human experience and what we all go through, and how to keep yourself going through really difficult times. So I appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. That keeps me motivated.
That's good. See, it's working. Right?
Yeah.
And I'll make sure again that there is a link to your YouTube channel in the description. So yeah.
Great, thanks.
So I'm curious to know about if there are any other groups or organizations, projects out there that you want people to know about that are doing good work in this fight against racism.
I'm now getting my feet wet, I think, with Black Lives Matter. And taking my time to learn and to read. That's really why I am. So I don't have like basically an answer to that because I'm not that involved. The one that I have got involved in, I'm on the Citizens Action Committee for the Edmonton Institution for Women.
Okay.
Yeah, the Citizens Advisory Council, I think it's called, CAC. And so we just meet once a month just to talk about what's going on within the prison system, etc. It's again, getting involved, giving back, and wanting to see justice wherever justice is needed. So I'm getting involved there. But like for me, I'm learning. I'm reading a whole lot and keeping my eyes and ears open to what's going on, because I think what comes naturally to me would be dealing with racism where I am. I have 3 sons, I've said that before. I have 3 young sons. And so it bothers me that I want to create a world for them where they will be okay as much as possible. And so I don't have like names, whatever, but I do have some ideas, and I've jotted down some stuff in terms of the kinds of organizations where parents are concerned, and all of us are concerned with loving, I think for me, Black sons. And it's not a black thing. I think this is an inflection point where the focus is on dealing with that one issue of what is going on with Black people. And it's not to exclude everybody else. It's just that it's an inflection point for this culture, this race, etc. And I think it bears, we all have a responsibility, all peoples, to be able to focus in on them. Let's solve this. And that might be wishful thinking and my inspirational bent again, but let's try to solve this one and then move on to the next wherever it raises its head.
That makes sense, because it's so easy to get caught up in all there's 100 different things that we could be involved in, but how do you gain traction in 100 different things at the same time, as opposed to really directing yourself in one area and making a difference there? I guess, at least on my next question is, what advice do you have for people who want to get out there and make a difference and contribute?
The first thing you need to step back and think of what means anything to you and speak your truth. There are some ugly truths that I have had to speak to myself as a Black person that I've had to deal with. I'm now reading this book by Abraham X. Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And I've just felt so convicted because he's presenting a whole new philosophy of how not to be on any side of racism, and to look at people for who they are, as opposed to labeling an entire race, yay or nay, Black or white, positive or negative. And we all do it, I think, whatever the race. And so for me, I find it's about learning who you are, speaking your truth, and starting from a point where you can sustain what you want to do. The fly-by-night just doesn't fly anymore. And I'm trying to figure out my coordinate to make sure that I can make a difference that lasts, and something that can sustain itself and that I can sustain. That's very important to me, the quality, I guess, as opposed to just the noise. So I would say, like, if you want to get involved, you need to first examine yourself and figure out, where are you on this race spectrum? I don't think anybody has a clean slate, honestly, Ellen. I think we all have biases and stereotypical ways, etc., that we need to kind of address before you can go out with a placard. I've always felt that way, even about, like, in the past, feminism, and I was like, wait a minute, what is this really about? And I think it goes deeper for me, like just the loud voices. And I was reading the other day that somebody said, if you just simply act out of anger, you don't get anything done. It's not going to last. In my opinion and in my experience, being very angry, whatever, just simply gets people's backs up against and they will not respond to you. We want change. We want a better society. What is the best way to do that? I'm always starting from strategy. So one way is think about what you want to do. The second one, and this one is very important because I am a family person, is to start within your whole family unit. You won't believe, I feel like we can speak to our circles in ways that somebody, an agitator on the outside, cannot. I have been to basketball matches with my sons. They play basketball right now. And, it's all good with the parents. Sometimes the grandparents come, and their reactions to seeing people of different races all together tells you that there's work that needs to be done there. So while the parents might be quite progressive and inclusive because they've lived and they've, evolved with the times, the conversations have not gone back to be able to affect and to effect change within the generations before. And these are the people who take care of the sons and daughters who will be hanging out with my kids. How is that going to be? So I feel like if you have progressed any where racial relations are concerned and you're quite inclusive, have those conversations at your tables. It's going to make a lot easier transition when the older generations come out and see people. Like that for me, the family unit, like there are certain conversations we are not going to have in my family. Even when people aren't watching and listening, you are going to be respectful of all races, of all sexualities, of all religions, etc., because it's a value for us. So when you go out, you will already have it so deeply rooted that you can act upon it in a positive way.
I think that's
sorry. I rambled. Sorry.
No, that's amazing. Like I've heard some of the same sentiments in my own family saying if we want our daughters to treat men better, then we need to raise them differently. We want our sons to treat women better, we need to raise them differently. My mom's sister has always said that, depending on how you want your kids to be in the world, that's how you need to teach them. You're right. You're absolutely right. Because you see the subsequent generations and things get a little bit better, but we're still informed by the generations that come before us because they're the ones that teach us. So you're exactly right. Yeah.
Wow. So that's it for me, like those two things, like know yourself and speak to your family. That's a good place to start.
Right. And for people that want to get out into the world and contribute in a positive and meaningful way, what can they do?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. Move the question forward. Yeah, find a cause. Find a cause. Like there's a Black Lives Matter chapter in Edmonton. Find a cause that is dear to you. There's so many facets of this. Is it the relationship with police? Can you get involved there? Can you contribute monetarily? That is also needed. Where do you have influence? Where can you best make a difference? Find a cause that speaks to you and that you can perhaps contribute to, and go for it. I think there are many ways to contribute, like each one teach one, each one help one. Even after this happened on May 25th, that George Floyd thing, I found just going into supermarkets and so on, honestly, Ellen, like I found people were a lot more polite. I was like, what is this? Like people are a lot more conscious. I don't know about now, but people seem to be a lot more conscious of race relations and about being very polite, etc. And I mean, I'm not even sure how I feel about it, because you wonder how long is it going to last, how deeply felt it is. But it's a good sign that people are thinking. So I guess they've started doing the inner work to be able to affect the outside, basically. So start to read, start to do what you need to do to help solve the problem, and find a cause that works for you. There's a lot of work to be done if we look.
I agree. I think we're living in an amazing time right now, because we have the focus is on this issue now, like it's never been before, and we have an opportunity to affect real change. So like keeping the conversation going with interviews like this, to me, are essential, because it keeps the idea in people's minds, and it keeps that self-reflection happening. And I think that's one of the ways in which we do affect change. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that you'd like to add? Anything else that you want to say?
Not really. I think I've kind of exhausted my own self, right? Yeah, but you know, like I'm always about deal with yourself. Deal with yourself so that you come across as authentic. You know, like we all have those things. I think we probably will take years, the rest of our lives, to be able to figure out who we are. But where race relations are concerned, for me, I'm like always, if I put myself in your shoes, there's certain things that I will do and I won't do. So that's a good place to start.
So maybe we can just pick up on what you were saying before. You're talking about your authentic self, right?
Yeah.
Be true to yourself. Yeah, pick up where you left off there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just think it's very, very important in so many ways right now, right? Like I've been thinking, Ellen, this whole thing of we're into literature, so everything is about an analogy and metaphor. But
Right.
this thing of masking, you know, you need to wear a mask physically, but it can almost lead to some kind of unmasking if you really want it to be, because you're hunkered down, you have the time to really think about yourself and to improve yourself. So even while you're masked, there's an unmasking that can go on. And I think that was part of me doing Basement Chronicles. I started the very early episodes by saying it's where I wanted to talk about the foundational things in a literal sense, because I'm recording from my basement.
Right.
But you know, I've just always been interested in the elemental things. Let's put the foundation together as well as we can so we can build on it. And for me, like the whole COVID thing, it's tragic in a sense. It's also that ability to delve into yourself in a new way. So that, you know, authenticity, I think, is very important. And you know, I'm just trying to live it out the best I see it. It actually makes it easier. Just be yourself.
Right. You know, it's interesting. I've been talking to a number of people who have gone through a huge amount of self-reflection through all of this. Like it's when everything shut down, it's like people had to take a step back and they had to reassess. And I think that as the world is sort of coming back into animation, people are asking hard questions about their own lives and what they want their lives to continue to be and what they want to include in that. So it's, yeah, that's really important, I think, as we move forward, to look at being authentic, to, you know, and living in a way that is conducive to who you are and as you know, what you want to be as you move forward.
Yeah. And in a way, we've been forced to deal with it. And right now, we're dealing with what's left.
Right.
A lot of it, like relationships have broken up. People have learned new ways of doing things, which made you realize that the old ways were not so necessary after all.
Right.
You've realized that, hey, I can just be myself and it's okay. So you're dealing with these new realities going forward because you've had to just get lighter, not so much baggage, right? So it's like I'm living a metaphor.
Right.
I think we all are.
I think you're right, and I think we're kind of doing that as a culture too, as
Yes,
like a world culture, because we're reassessing some of these old ways of doing things that don't serve us anymore. That they're built on these antiquated ideas of inequality and inequity that we just don't value anymore. So we have to make changes. You know?
Yeah, and it also tells me that that aspect of life, the whole social aspect, inequality, racism, etc., was such a big thing. It has been forced to the fore. So it means it had to be dealt with. That's how I see it, which is why there's a platform for all of these movements and all of these reflections and changes. I'm not even sure, but to me, there should be a website or something that really chronicles what has happened since COVID, where race is concerned. So many things have been dismantled. So many things have just disappeared. So many changes and groups have formed that are elemental, I think, to the way we go forward. I'm not even sure if anybody's chronicling all of them worldwide, but I think it's a global movement that, yeah, needs to be recorded somehow.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that is a great place to leave this.
Yeah.
Because it's self-reflective. It's very thoughtful. So thank you once again for your time, for the great work that you're doing, for speaking with us. I really appreciate it. And my thanks to the WGA, to WestWord, and to everybody who's watching. So thank you. Yeah, it was great talking with you, Lisa.
Yeah, you too, Ellen. Thanks for the platform. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's an important conversation to keep having. So I'm really glad that you took the time today.
Definitely. Yeah.
Thank you.
And while I have some juice,